You've counted every calorie, tried every diet, spent hours in the gym, and still something's missing. You want more than just weight loss. You want your energy back. You want your confidence restored. You want a way of living that doesn't feel like punishment. Welcome to Master Your Metabolism, where we cut through the noise, ditch the fads, and give you a real plan to become the healthiest, strongest version of you. Hosted by our team of expert coaches with proven strategies, science-based tips, and real-life encouragement, not just to help you lose fat, but actually create that lifestyle that you love. You've tried everything. Now, let's try what actually works. This is your turning point. Let's go. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Master Your Metabolism, the podcast. I am here today with my lovely
What's
husband,
going on,
Calvin.
everybody?
So I figured a nice topic that we've been getting a lot of questions about recently is with fat loss and things to consider before going into a fat loss phase, while you're in a fat loss phase, and as well as what to do after the fat loss phase. Because there are some things that are really helpful to really get the most out of this phase. So starting with when you're going into a fat loss phase. So I wanted to share with people some of the things that they want to keep in mind when they are getting started. For instance, like where their calories should start in a fat loss phase.
Right. So you definitely want to make sure that you have a full tank of calories before you go into a fat loss phase because you want to create a calorie deficit. That's the main thing to be able to get weight to start to drop. And so the calorie deficit is going to really depend on how many calories your body is used to consuming per day. So if you have been under consuming calories for a long time, say if your maintenance, your AKA, or actually your total daily energy expenditure calories per day, which is how many calories your body requires to maintain, but also cover the activity and everything. That would be considered your maintenance calories. There's a certain number for that your body requires. So what I find a lot is that people undereat quite a bit under that. So what happens is their body just metabolically adapts to those calories, even though they're less. So say that their TDEE would be, say, 2,500 calories, but they're eating 1,800 calories per day. And they've been doing it for months upon months upon months. And that's where they've been. Their body is now adapted to that, meaning that it's become their new maintenance because now they're not losing weight at that calorie amount and they're not gaining weight. So that's just their body's just staying status quo with this number. So now the problem with this, and I understand the logic of people that stay under because they're afraid that they're going to gain weight if they eat more. And so they just ate, a little bit under, but then they want to all of a sudden lose the extra weight. Now, to go back and circle back around to the calorie deficit, right? So normally a cut's going to start somewhere in the range between 300 to 500 calories. And that's just the first cut. And that's just to get things kind of moving. And ideally through a cut, you're going to cut as your body adapts because your body will. Once you make that first cut, your body will start to drop weight, should start to drop weight. And it starts to adapt after a few weeks. And those weight drops kind of slow down. And really around 3 to 4 weeks, the body will stop dropping and it starts to adapt to those calories. Not in every case. Some people, we've been able to put them in their first cut, and they drop for a couple months. This is very generic in this, time frame, but it does happen, right? So now if you think about it, so say if your maintenance calories is 2,500, and then I'm talking about a male. If it is a female, it'd probably be around 2,000. So let's just switch it over to female because there's probably more listening, that are female. So say you're eating 1,500, and not the 2,000. So that means your first cut is going to bring you right down to probably 1,200 calories minimum. And that's just to get weight moving. And realistically, a 300 calorie cut's not going to bring you much return. Not going to bring you much return. So what does that tell you? Your body's going to drop a couple pounds, maybe, and then you're going to have to go into that next cut. Well, where are you going to go in the next cut? You're going to go to 1,000 calories or less. Now, what happens then? You start to lose muscle. Your body starts to downregulate. It goes into stress. So this is the most common problem that we see is that people get stuck in this rut and they wonder why they can't lose weight. So circling back around to why it's important to have calories built up, prior to the cut is so that your body adapts to a higher amount of calories. So we like to overshoot the maintenance. So we do that systematically through a reverse diet, that we bring calories up so that we, in most cases, they don't gain weight, but in even more cases, actually lose weight because we're speeding metabolism up. And then we kind of see that weight stops dropping. We were like, okay, that's their sweet point right there. We'll keep them right there and let their body adapt. So now you have the same female that maybe is eating 2,200 calories. So now her first cut might be 1,800. So you see, she has plenty of calories to cut from at that point. So now she's going to get a lot of value out of this fat loss phase.
Like a longer fat loss phase. You're just adding more
Longer, less
time.
stress, less painful, you know?
Yep. Yep.
So that's the first step is you really kind of want to make sure that your body's ready to go into a fat loss phase. It was just something that I don't think most people think about. They just know, "Oh, crap, I got to lose weight." And boom, they cut calories down to less and it causes more problems.
Yeah. And also thinking about before a fat loss phase, how many times you have dieted that year or those past couple of years, because a lot of people that constantly are in that fat loss phase and they'll be in a fat loss phase, they'll lose a little bit of weight and then they kind of eat how they were eating before rather than just slowly reversing back up. And then they gain the weight back and then they go into another deficit and they just constantly keep yo yoing like that. And that's another instance that they may not see as much of a difference when they're going into a fat loss
Right.
phase.
So one thing to consider with your body is your body performs best when you stay with consistency. That's true in weightlifting, that's true in anything that you do. If you're taking a class in school, what's going to bring you the most return? Consistency to the learning, to the studying, rather than I'll get to it when I get to it. It's consistency is with everything. So, when you're going in and out of diets, what kind of happens is your body just doesn't know how to regulate at this point, and so it is not going to know, when you go into a calorie deficit, it's kind of like very familiar to it. So it knows how to fight back. It knows how to protect. The one thing you want to keep in mind, and this is kind of will make you have a better understanding about fat loss, is that when you go into a calorie deficit, meaning you're less calories than what your TDEE is, your body senses that over time as a stress because you're not taking enough calories to support your daily activity. Now, that can be, in a sense, a positive adaptation at first, because the weight will drop. It's not unhealthy to go into a cut. It's unhealthy to cut too much and too long. But it's actually healthy to go into a cut and cut weight once, maybe even twice a year, depending on how much you're going to do. So, but when it's in and out, because what happens with a lot of people is they go out on a weekend, they have some drinks, they have some cheeseburgers, whatever, and they gain a little bit of weight. Then, oh, I'm back in a cut this week. All right, back in a cut for a week and back at it again on the weekend. Then we go back into a cut, then back at it again the weekend. And so your body doesn't like that. And so your chances are you'll end up gaining more weight from that. But it's the consistency of kind of maintaining and sticking to it. And then, meaning that when you actually do go into the fat loss phase, as much as you want to pull out and go have that cheeseburger again, you're going to go back in that hamster cage, of going back, on revolutions, you're not going to see the weight loss.
Yep, for sure. And that's why when I usually have people that are starting, I would tell them, look for a span of a few months that you can commit and say, I'm going to be all in for this fat loss phase. And really looking at, hey, do I have any holidays or plans coming up or vacations that are planned or cruises that I'm going on and all of the things. Because if you're looking at a span of time and you only have like one vacation or one, you know, something coming up that you really want to just enjoy, having one or two is one thing. But if you're looking, and I have people that are like, well, I want to start in a fat loss phase in November. Really? Because you have Thanksgiving, you have the holidays, you have birthdays, you're planning your vacation, and then, okay, I'll start in January. So it's really looking at a time frame that you want to commit. And this is what we do at the end of the year, that we're going to have like a goal setting for people that they can look at the year and say, what time frame do I want to be in a fat loss phase? What time frame do I want to be in that recovery or reverse phase? Because if you can do that and plan it out, that's how you'll have success, because also you'll know the finish line. Because a lot of people will start a fat loss phase and they don't know how long they want to be on it. They just kind of keep going. And if you know how long, a lot of times it's easier to commit
because okay, it'll be done here. And that's where I can start bringing my
Yeah,
calories back
that's what
up.
it's all about. It's just like anything is planning, planning for, planning your food when you go out for the day, planning your fat loss phase, and kind of knowing when you're going into it, and you can kind of schedule things around that. Like, what would not be a good idea to schedule when you're going into a fat loss phase? I would say a cruise, something similar to that, where it's going to be something that kind of revolves around food. If you are scheduling those things during your fat loss phase, then you're probably not taking the fat loss phase too seriously, because that's going to throw you off. A lot of people say, well, I have the willpower, I'm going to get there and I'm going to stick to it because I need to get this weight off. Then you get in the element and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to put yourself in that situation. I'll be honest, I have cut down to 5% body fat 23 times in the last 10 years for competition reasons. And I do not put myself in those situations when I'm in prep. I just don't do it because as much practice as I have, I'm human, I smell food, it triggers things, and it just sets me up for failure. So you can't always avoid it. There's going to be birthday parties, there's going to be certain events,
For
but
sure.
to actually put yourself in that predicament, knowing that you're going to be in a place where you probably won't have very good options, it's something that you want to be mindful of. Is this kind of a self sabotaging act? So that's something you want to pay attention to, because I will say that one thing that we've learned over time is a lot of people that say that they want to lose weight do want to do it and they say it, but they also want to give themselves an out subconsciously. And that's through self sabotage. And so we catch it a lot of times, and we'll tell them ahead of time, this is something that's going to throw you off. So we're going to prepare for this ahead of time. So that preparation is everything. So knowing when you're going to a fat loss phase and scheduling and things like carb refeeds, this is something a lot of people don't do. And it's probably because they don't know about it, even free meals, even diet breaks. So just to kind of explain these and not get too deep into them, but when your carbs are very low and you're in a fat loss phase, and I would say when I say low carbs, that's less carbs, grams of carbs in your body weight. That would be low carb for sure. You should be having at least one refeed per week. For females, I would argue I'd probably say two refeeds per week, where you add an extra 100 grams of carbs 1 to 2 days per week. Drop the fats down a little bit, maybe to 40 grams or something. And you do that and it replenishes your body. It boosts leptin hormone. There's a gatekeeper of fat loss. So a lot of times when people get stuck in weight, it's because they're not given that little bit of relief through the carb refeeds. But that also gives you longevity in the cutting phase. That can prolong that cutting phase. So what I used to say to people is don't stand a cut more than 3 months out of the year, for the average person. Now you can do it for 6 months, but when you do it 6 months, it has to include refeeds. It has to include diet breaks,
Diet.
to be able to do that and be successful with it, not cause too much negative adaptations. Now, a diet break would be a week, 7 days. Well, I would say 3 to 7 days. And I've actually pushed it as much as 2 weeks with some people, where you bring your calories back up to full maintenance calories, bring your fats, your carbs up. I even lower protein a little bit to help with digestion. And that gives your body a break out of the deficit for a week, which drops cortisol, which puts your body back into a rested, a parasympathetic state where it's ready to release weight again. Because when it gets stressed, like I mentioned, a calorie deficit is a stress, it can stop that weight loss. And that's a cortisol response, it's a stress response. So that diet break, half the time when a person needs it, you'll see a little bump in weight the first couple of days and weight will start dropping, even though we bump them up 500, 600 calories. And I'll keep them in that diet break until their weight stops dropping. And like I said, it's gone as far as 2 weeks before. So these little tricks can help prolong that time. But it is something that you want to stick to until you hit your goal and then you reverse out.
Yeah. And the same way of what you were saying with the refeed and the diet break, all it is relief, right? So if you think of that, your body's working during a fat loss phase, your body's like stressed during a fat loss phase. And you think of, someone when they're at work, you have a weekend off to give you that relief. So that's what that refeed is to your body. It's having a weekend. And then sometimes you need a little bit of a vacation when you've been going really hard. So that's what the diet break is. And then that reverse is just slowly starting to bring things up. So we did a podcast on reverse dieting, so y'all can check that out. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on before starting a fat loss phase that is very helpful is getting labs done. because there are some markers that you want to see, like your A1C, like your glucose, like your, how your thyroid function is, because these all give us a really good insight. It's almost like a blueprint to know what is going on in your body and what we need to keep in mind when we are going into a fat loss phase. Because if you're looking at your labs, your thyroid is tanked, that is your metabolism. And if your thyroid is really busting, you have to kind of figure out what is going on in the body. And this is going to cause resistance when going into a fat loss phase. So you want to definitely look at some of these lab markers, your A1C to see, looking at inflammation in the body. Do we need to start working on stress management, on sleep, and doing things before the cut to make sure everything's in place? Because when somebody's going into a fat loss phase, which we're going to talk about next, sleep can actually stop you from losing weight. And if you are
Right.
not
Lack of sleep.
sleeping,
Lack of sleep.
this lack of sleep. So this is something that will stall a cut. I've told people that they could be doing all that they can in the gym. They could be doing all they need with nutrition. But if they are stressed out and not sleeping, we're going to have a really hard time in a fat loss
Yeah.
phase.
I'm working with a guy right now. He was a competitor with me for the last couple of years, and he ended up taking a different job driving an Uber car. And so he's working long hours right now. And since he started doing this, he's sleeping literally 4 hours a night. He's going and going. So his job itself is not physically hard, not stressful. It's not that. And he's getting to the gym, he's getting his workouts in, but he's getting 4 hours sleep a night. Now, this is a guy that is naturally lean, and it was getting him lean for stage was no biggie. It was adding size on him that was what was difficult. But since this happened, things turned around, and we tried to put him into prep last year, and I had to pull him out because his body was resisting. And when we reverse him, he's gaining weight. And so now we're battling this weight gain with him. And his labs weren't bad, but it's a cortisol response of lack of sleep. The sleep has a huge impact, huge impact. And he's carrying the weight mainly in his midsection. He's puffy. And it's because the sleep. Everything else is in alignment. We've with food and it's just a tough thing to beat. So, it's if even if you can just get an hour more a night, just start with that. Ideally you want to get at least 7 hours, 9 hours is best, but if you can get 7 hours, you're going to be okay. Less than 7 hours, I can tell you, you're going to have some resistance, so
Yep. And I would say the other thing that is probably, or actually two things that are probably the biggest um, things that are a challenge in a fat loss phase would be eating out and
mm,
alcohol. So we wanted to go into like, eating out is the obvious, right? They're cooking with things that have a lot of fats that you're not accounting for, a lot of oils and things like that. And many people actually are reactive to a lot of the things that they cook with. And people will notice you go out to eat and you'll gain weight and it'll kind of stick there for a couple of days. That's probably from the oils. And a lot of times, if I had somebody that was eating out frequently, like 3 to 4 times a week, and the labs looked awful. He's eating healthy when he's going out, but the labs are looking awful and he's constantly bloated and he just couldn't drop weight. And it's a lot of times when you eat out that frequently and you're not eating foods that you're making at home, it can cause resistance with fat loss. And then alcohol is the other thing that when you're having it 2 or more drinks, you're not sleeping. You're not getting into that REM sleep, which we already discussed was an issue, but you're also not going to metabolize the food the same way because your body's really working on getting this alcohol out of your system because it's a toxin. So you'll have a couple drinks on the weekends and then your body won't be in fat burning mode till like Wednesday. Then you'll be on it for a couple of days and then all of a sudden you're going out over the weekends again and it's just this
yeah.
constant
And that
constant
the
battle.
alcohol can shoot your cortisol up for a couple days, and it will mess the stomach up. You won't go to REM sleep until you burned the alcohol. So if have ever noticed, if you've gone out to a dinner, had some drinks, and you go to sleep that night, even if it's just a couple drinks, you wake up very groggy because you probably didn't get to REM sleep until about 4 o'clock in the morning, and maybe you woke up at 7. So you got 3 good hours of sleep. That was it.
Yep. Yep. All right. So next is expectations for fat loss. What would you say is a successful fat loss phase? How much they will be losing per week that they would be maintaining muscle.
Yeah, a lot of that depends on how much body fat you have that you're starting off with. So if you have somebody who's 100 pounds to lose 200 pounds or even 50 plus, you want to see some bigger drops in the beginning. But a lot of that's going to be water weight, coming off. But the fat will come off easier in the beginning. So I like to kind of go aggressive in those cases. Excessive fat is kind of a cushion. You can actually push a little harder, go a little harder in calories, push cardio a little bit more when there's excessive fat and get that. But once you start to get the body fat down, say for guys, less than 20%, and say for girls, less than 25%, then you want to see kind of around 1 to 2 pounds per week. That's where you kind of the sweet spot. You may see more some weeks. It may happen. Don't freak out. You're not wilting away to nothing, but it's not that you want to see that all the time. You don't want to see, I blame this a lot on I'm not even going to say the internet. I think this was back before that. It was The Biggest Loser, was a great example of this, and how they kind of trained and they would take these people that are really heavy and they would have these goals. It was a competition, you know, and they would push these people to their threshold, you know, and they're all in to do it, because they know this is their big time to lose that weight. They may not get this chance again in their life, but they push so aggressively that I think a lot of people know the outcome of that show is that everybody gained that weight back and then some. So at the end of the day, to go through all that work and all that work that they went through and to put that kind of effort in to gain the weight back, is where's the point to it? It feels good for a little bit, but in the end, do you feel worse or do you feel better? So you want to think when you're losing weight that you want to keep that weight off. So the right way to do that is, like I was saying, go a little bit more aggressive when you have extra weight. But when you start to lean out, you want to think smaller portion. You want to think, even for females, I would say half a pound a week. But on the top end, 2 pounds. But we've had people come on and they're dropping 5 pounds in a month, 6 pounds in a month, maybe more, and they're like, I don't understand why I'm not dropping weight, and I'm like,
Yep, 9 pounds a month.
yeah, you're doing all right. And so, but they have it in their head and they have the boot camps and stuff that are just pounding and pounding it, but that's creating stress and
I think it's the weight
there
loss
will be the
drugs
boomerang.
too, that a weight loss drugs,
Right.
people see these people that are dropping this
Right.
crazy amount of weight, but keeping in mind, when you do it like that, it's because those people don't have the appetite and they are eating literally like 1 meal or 2 meals, so they are losing more
Yeah.
muscle. And the reason you don't wanna lose muscle is because in the end, when you've lost muscle, that is your metabolism. Your muscle is what allows you to be able to eat more, right? So if you have more muscle mass, the same amount of food is now a deficit with more muscle mass. So you want to think of like a cup. If you have a small cup and you have a big cup, same amount of water, there's more space. Like you're in a deficit because you have more muscle. So if you lose too quickly and you're losing muscle mass because you're not eating enough protein, you're not resistance training during your fat loss phase, then when you come out of it, that's where you'll gain all the weight back because now you have lowered your basal metabolic rate. So you cannot eat as
Yeah.
much. So you go back, now you're really hungry because your body fat is decreased, but now that hunger is gonna
Yeah.
trigger more, you're gonna wanna eat more, and then you don't have the
Yeah,
capacity
when you
to do
push that
so.
hard, a lot of things happen, and this is one of the reasons why we want to see lab, blood panels when we work with people because we want to see what condition is their body in. Because when you do go aggressive, it's very similar to a prep for a bodybuilding show. Sometimes preps can get pretty hard, and it is whatever it takes mentality with competitors. But knowing that they're using a coach, this is a key thing. When you're using a coach, you can push, you can redline it for a certain period of time because this coach is monitoring and knows your body but also knows how to fix you coming out of this. And that's what's the important part is understanding how to fix the damage that is caused from that fat loss phase to bring out. Now that's extreme. Bodybuilding's an extreme sport. It is healthy 90% of the time until that last 10% when you're in that low body fat and you're pushing. So now this goes for lifestyle clients as well. They go and they hit these boot camps or CrossFit and they're going and they're under eating and they're pushing, the weight's coming off, right? And it's dropping. But what's happening is that stress is having the same effect it would with a competitor, a natural competitor, where their testosterone is dropping. Everything that's metabolic related is slowing down because the body senses danger. It senses a famine. So it wants to slow fat loss down. It wants to start to store it in the midsection to keep you alive. Right. So that's its defense. That's why you see it starts to burn muscle more, because muscle is very expensive to keep. It requires a lot of calories to maintain. So your body's like, well, wait a second, we got to keep this person alive. Let's chill out with the fat a little bit. And so they got something to keep them going. And let's just pull from the muscle. That's what's happening. So when you're seeing those big drops like that, when you're, not carrying around a lot of body fat, you're losing a lot of muscle, and that is not good weight gain. That's not the route you want to go. And going back to the drugs, for like Ozempic and things like that. I mean, this is definitely something for a different podcast because there's so much information that goes into this. But the issue with that is that people are seeing it and they're seeing the big drops. And the reason why there's so many people that are having issues in the end is for that same reason. They're ending up under eating and their body still senses the stress, even though a lot of them aren't even exercising. A lot of them aren't changing the lifestyle habits that made them gain that weight in the first place. They're just taking the pill and just rolling with it and not eating. And like, look at me. Bad things around the corner. Bad things around the corner. So it drops, they lose their muscle. They're eating 500 calories a day. What do you think your body's doing at this point? It's weathering that storm on the inside. It's preparing. It's keeping you alive. It knows you're in a famine. And guess what's going to happen when you come off that drug that's costing you $1,000 a month? Because how long are you going to stay on that drug for $1,000 a month? Not that long, And when you come off, that appetite comes right back. Only now you have no metabolism. Your testosterone's bottomed out. Chances are you're basically in menopause early, because menopause is just a downregulation of hormones. You hear all these horrible things about menopause. Guess what? You just did that to yourself ahead of time. So what happens to them? They gain that weight in the midsection, all the things, right? So now that's not saying that like peptides are bad. They're just misused in that sense. So you can still use a peptide, which for certain people, it's a great thing. It is a great thing, absolutely. But having
Having direction.
direction, I highly, highly recommend, if you're going to mess with something like that, to have a coach oversee you. Do not, unless you have a very good provider and they really know their stuff inside and out, you really need to have somebody monitor you during this to make sure that you're doing things right as you go into it, but also as you come out. So when you come out, you don't gain that weight back. And that's the critical thing, because that's a lot of money spent, for that, but also the metabolic damage that comes with it. But if you do things right, you can get in, you can make this happen, and you can actually gain muscle, because that can actually be anabolic as well. But it has to be very strategic in how you do it. But that's the thing, is that you do want to change the lifestyle habits.
That's most important,
Why?
whether you're
Right.
on the
While
drug or
you're on
not.
it, you need to change those things, because that's what's one is going to give you the best bang for your buck on this, where you're going to look your best. But also when you come out of it, if you haven't changed those things and you go right back to where you were, it's just going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess and you're going to regret it. So very important when you do this, that you're taking that knowledge and you're taking that mindset of saying, okay, I'm doing this to better myself, not to just have an easy way out. Right.
And people, and that's the thing, lifestyle habits, I think they think, well, now I have to do this and I can't ever have anything I enjoy. I think lifestyle habits, it's really understanding that shift of saying, okay, when I'm in a fat loss phase, I have to be a lot more adherent, right? I have to be 100% on point because I want to get the best results because I'm in it for a short period of time. When I slowly start to bring up my calories, that's where you can think, okay, if I have maybe one night that I go and have a piece of pizza, or one night that I go and do this, it's more shifting the percentages, right? If 100% of the time you're going and eating garbage and not sleeping and not drinking your water and not doing the things, and then you start shifting and saying, okay, you know what? Now 50% of the time I'm going to do well, 50% of the time I'm still going to enjoy some stuff. Cool. Now the next shift over a couple of months, now I'm going to start being about 80% that I'm going to be 100 on point, and about 20% that I can go out and enjoy some things. And if you can do that and think of it more as like a balanced lifestyle, that's where you can have that sustained results, right? And start seeing the changes and being able to kind of
Yeah.
stay in that
Yeah.
place.
You can turn your life around
And
with that. You can. You can.
yep. And it's not just obviously for fat loss, but also your health and things like that, because we do have a lot of people that are reaching out to us lately because, oh my gosh, every person in my family that was a male died by the age of 59. Or I had everybody in my family that has diabetes. Like, people are waiting until they get the diagnosis. Let's do some prevention and really just changing some lifestyle habits, because it really can change the trajectory of your future with regards to your health. And then when you are on a fat loss phase, some things to remember, and you can kind of share with this, because there will be hunger. That is normal. If you are in a cut or in a fat loss phase, you should feel hungry, not to the point that you want to like chew your arm off, but you are going to have some hunger. So, some tips and things. I know that you have all your recipes, but, I always tell people, think about nutrient dense foods, things that you can eat that will give you a lot of volume, but not a lot of calories. Things like
Vegetables, boy, that's my
vegetables,
go-to.
those cucumbers, and cucumbers, you can slice them up super thin with like a mandolin, put them with like a little salt and vinegar, and that's something that you can chew on and have a lot of volume. Even rice compared to potatoes. Potatoes, you can have a lot more volume if you have limited carbs with something like that. And, there's always
And
TikTok and
yeah,
Calvin's
and
recipe.
water is a big one. This is one that a lot of people skip the boat on, and it really is the thing that kind of destroys them in the end. I can't emphasize enough that you need to drink enough water for many reasons. Many reasons. One, outside of this, is your kidney function. I've seen people's kidney function on labs jacked up really bad, really bad. And a lot of the doctors will blame the protein. It's not the protein. They're under drinking water. They're not drinking enough water to flush their system out, and it's pushing the kidney function up. Now they have to end up lowering the protein because they're not supporting it with the water. So that's one thing. The other is you're going to get hungry when you're dehydrated. So if you're not drinking enough water, you will have hunger. Just so you know. That's so the first thing you want to do is when you feel hunger pangs, you know, drink some water. Chances are your hunger is going to go away. I that's the first thing I do when I feel hunger. I go and I just have a glass of water, and 9 times out of 10 it goes away. Now, if your stomach starts to growl, you're hungry. You probably should go eat. But if the hunger pain goes away, from that water, then you were just dehydrated. So, it's I like to tell people a gallon a day. Guys should actually drink a little bit more. If they're a decent sized guy. For females, that's a generalized amount, you know, but it's usually enough. That's why I say it. But really, if your pee is clear by like say noon, then you're drinking enough water in that case. But you keep it consistent through the day. But you can't drink enough water. You can always drink more, but you can't under. And but also for digestion too, if your water is under and you get dehydrated, you're going to get backed up. So if you deal with
You're having too much fiber and you start eating all the veggies to keep you full and you're not drinking water, you have more fiber and not enough water. So you're basically going to create like constipation because you have like, all this fiber and nothing to push it through. So making sure that you have that proper balance between fiber, water, and also making sure that your electrolytes are
yeah.
balanced
And
with the
also,
water.
I'm
I tell
sorry,
people salt.
cut you off. So the other thing to consider too is if you're not drinking water, what are you drinking? You know, and how many calories is that?
Hmm.
Another thing I noticed too is a lot of people when they log food, I don't typically see drinks on there. So I'm assuming that all they're doing is drinking water, but I don't think that's always the case, you know. So what is the drinks that you're having and how many calories are in those? You know. So I had actually a guy that was a competitor that I found out right before peak week that he was having a glass of orange juice every morning. Big glass of orange juice. And not logging it, So we're looking at about 60 grams of carbs, liquid. That is an huge insulin spike. And I'm talking in the morning when you do not really want carbs, Best breakfast you guys can have, just so you guys know, is protein and fats to regulate blood sugars. If you just do that one thing with some fiber in the morning, right out of bed, and then bring carbs in second meal, change that one thing, folks, you'll start to lose weight. All right. But also chugging water in the morning, but not orange juice right out of the gate, because that insulin spike will trigger hunger the rest of the day, you know. So you want to regulate your blood sugars first, with proteins and fats, healthy fats and some fiber, and then bring in carbs after that. So
Absolutely. And last thing is, which I had discussed, we had done a fat loss phase. I mean, another podcast on our reverse process. But you want to think about a cut is stress, right? And you're going and going and going. It's almost like, and we discussed this in the other podcast, that you're working all the time, 12-hour days, 7 days a week, without a break. That's what your body feels like during a cut. And when you go through a reverse or a recovery phase, you're slowly giving your body recovery. So it's like giving weekends off. Then I'm going to cut the days down to 5 8-hour days. Then I'm going to cut it down to 3 8-hour days, then 3 half days, then a month off with no work. That is kind of the process of what we do with the recovery phase after the fat loss. And that's where you were talking about that your body's recovering, you continue to lose body fat. Most people will continue to see improved body composition all the way up to their maintenance. And then when you get there, that's where you'll be able to say, okay, am I good where I am? I have the body that I want. I'm eating 2,000 calories, and that's how I can maintain this weight loss that I've achieved. Or, I get to the top and cool. Now I'm back at 2,000 calories, and now I have lots of room to go through a whole nother cut, so I'll be able to reach it. So it's that process. It's going through a fat loss phase, a recovery phase, and at your maintenance. Those are the only 3 stages that you need to go through. And if you have someone that you're working with, a coach that you're working with that can guide you through that, giving you diet breaks and refeeds and things when it's needed, that's how you can have a very successful fat
Yeah.
loss
And one
phase.
thing you want to keep consistent through this whole thing, whether it's in the cut, whether it's in the reverse maintenance, is weight training, just lifting weights, supporting muscle growth. You don't have to get jacked and get huge, but you do want to have some because, the amount of muscle in a person's quad is one of the way they measure longevity in a person. And that's because of the muscle mass and how the person is burning through calories, And so muscle itself is, it's going to deteriorate as you get older. When testosterone starts dropping, you get in your 40s and, 50s and whatnot. And so that will come down. So there will be atrophy. So you want to do everything you can to prevent that because the people that aren't doing it are the ones that are walking and using the walkers, having,
Yeah.
issues even moving around,
Can't get out of a chair.
need help getting out of
Yep.
bed, need assistance all the time. And they're 60 years old. Right. I got 2 guys in the last 3 months that were 70 plus years old that competed, went up in a national level. All right. And they lift. So this is really important. I can't stress it enough. It doesn't have to be 5 days a week, doesn't have to be 6 days a week. It can be 3 days a week. You just want to have enough to create some hypertrophy, and maintain. More muscle is going to benefit more because you will burn more calories. You will have more strength, over time and more muscle to pull from as you get older, And as far as cardio goes in a fat loss phase, one of the big questions I get too that we should probably run over real quick is what type of cardio to do? How do I do cardio? The way we prefer to do it, and I will say there's different ways you can go about it. The way that we normally try to do it is one of our big things that we put focus on it or emphasis on it in a cut is keeping stress as low as possible. So we find that if you start cardio too much too early, your body does adapt just the way it kind of adapts to food, everything. So it will adapt to the amount of cardio that you do, more particularly steady state cardio. So that's heart rate 110 to 130 does, say if you're running, or running is not a great example because I don't prescribe running to anybody, but don't hate me runners, but I just don't. So, because it's not the best for that. But say it's a fast walk, right? And say you're burning on your walk, the first week you did it, you're burning 300 calories. By the end of that month, your body starts to adapt. So you're probably burning 200, and then the next month is probably 150, because your body is adapting. So the way to combat this is to actually increase either one, the duration, the time frame, so if you're doing 20 minutes, increase to, you know, 25 minutes or, just add 5 minutes, every couple weeks, every few weeks, or increase the speed. That's one way to do it, but you got to be careful with that because as carbs come down, you don't want heart rate going up too much because that will stress your body out and things like HIIT, which is another form of cardio. It's high intensity interval training, where you do explosive movements, so it's like, say you're on a stationary bike, you warm up for a couple minutes and then you turn that tension on, then you crank it and you go as hard as you can go. I don't even give a time on this if somebody's doing it. I'm like, just go as hard as you think you can handle it. And you should last about 15, 20 seconds, to be honest, if you're really doing it. And your heart rate goes up, then you come down, you go back into, lower the tension, you just go low intensity for a little bit till you catch your breath. And then you repeat that for however many intervals you're prescribed to do. Now, which one should you do? Right? They both work. So I would say if your calories are at an adequate place, if you're at maintenance calories, either one. Honestly, the great thing about, steady state is it doesn't require recovery. So you can do a lot of steady state if you want. People that like to walk, you could walk for 2, 3 hours a day if you want to, and you don't have to recover. So you'll burn calories that whole time. With HIIT, you have to be careful how much you do it because that can cause overtraining. So I wouldn't say any more than 3 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week if you're gonna do that. There is an afterburn effect where you burn a little bit more calories after. It's not quite as much as what people originally thought, but there is still an afterburn effect to that, and, so you're not just burning the calories that you would burn during the session, but the sessions are shorter. So and again, you want to start off small, maybe 3 intervals in the beginning, then to 5, then to 7, maybe up to 9. I don't think you probably need to go any more than 9. Probably 7 would probably do it if you're really hitting it hard enough. And, but that can be very short. You're looking at, like, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15,
But somebody
and
that's
then
deficit. That's an
but
significant
now when
deficit.
those carbs come down, the thing you gotta remember when you're doing HIIT intervals or any type of HIIT training, whether it's a boot camp, CrossFit, those kind of things, where you're doing interval, like, where you're going really hard and you're winded, to the point you almost wanna throw up, that's using glycogen as your main fuel source. So if you're not supplying glycogen into your body to do this, your thyroid, your metabolism is getting it's like a speed bag. You're just punching and punching and punching. That stress is lowering that thyroid function over time. So, but also on top of that, it makes you very hungry, very hungry. If you've ever done it, you'll know what I'm talking about. You get very hungry after those HIIT sessions. So I do not recommend this in low calories. So the times I give HIIT is when calories are right around maintenance to get a jump start in fat loss, and then I pull it out, or I do it in a carb refeed day. The carb refeed day, I'll give anywhere from 3 to 5 intervals on a refeed because you're having extra carbs to support it. You can power punch it more carbs, for that day. So that would be a great time to do it. But as long as the calories aren't too low, either one works. Whichever time frame you have to work with, you can do both, do one or the other. But now in a reverse, we typically don't use cardio. We kind of want to bring stress down. That's part of why people lose weight on the reverse with this is we're lowering stress. And we've seen it too many times that people keep cardio in as they're reversing up, but they're not dropping weight, they're maintaining. And you can chalk that up to cortisol, because their body's coming out of the deficit and it just wants to repair. And they're doing that and they're not dropping the weight. So we typically pull it out, but we'll give a little bit of HIIT, 3 intervals post workout on the weeks that we increase carbs. So it's very quick. It takes 5 minutes, and so that is only on those weeks, and that helps people to, drop body fat on the way up. But we keep it as minimal as possible, and typically when we're in maintenance, and want people to recover, very, very seldomly do we give cardio. Very seldomly, because we're focused on recovery, and if they did things right, they're gonna be pretty happy with the way their body looks at that time, so they're not gonna really feel that need to do cardio. Now, if they botched up that reverse a little bit and had some stuff, we got to change the rules a little bit. We might have to add a little bit in, get it off, and get you back into normal, the weight that we want you at. But that's a different case. But saying the person stuck to the guidelines and did what they're supposed to do and lost the weight, you may not even have to go into another fat loss phase. And if you do, your body's desensitized to the cardio, so you can bring it back in the fat loss phase and get the most bang for your buck from it.
Yeah, and that's another thing when people start with us and they're already doing so much cardio and they've been under eating, it's really a matter of having to kind of pull back to give your body a little bit of recovery and start, recovering the body through increasing calories. Again, it's that relief. It's too many stressors on your body and you're coming to us not losing weight. This is why. So really understanding what your body needs, really listening to your body, how your body's responding with certain calories really gives us that starting point, know which direction we need to go. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us in this episode. And it would mean the world to us if you would leave us a review. And if you have any other topics you would like us to chat about, please drop them in the comments. And thank you again for tuning in.
Yep.
Until next time,
Talk to you guys
see you
soon.
later.
Thanks for tuning in to Master Your Metabolism. If you found value in today's episode, it would mean the world to us if you'd hit subscribe and share this episode with someone who could use a little guidance in their health journey. Ready to take the next step? Head over to www.mastersfitnesscoaching.com and you can book a free call right from the site so we can chat about your goals and how we can help support you. Don't forget to join our Facebook group where we're sharing coaching tips, support, and tricks to help keep you on track and continue making progress. You don't have to do this alone. We're here to walk with you every step of the way. Until next time, stay consistent, stay kind to yourself, and keep mastering your metabolism. Let's do this together.